Kenyans are saying that you have been given that docket knowing that there's no money in the national coffers. And one of the reasons they're saying that it is the appetite in terms of borrowing. Why do we borrow beyond the ceiling, which has been put using our regulation or rather policies? Why do we borrow for projects which cannot finance itself? For instance, there's this project of SGR, where we took a big loan from the Exim Bank in China, and up to date, it has been a challenge for us to finance that loan. Why do we sometimes just borrow using foreign currency, and when our shilling goes down, it becomes a big challenge to us? Why can't we just that are we taking non-concessional loans or are we taking concessional loans? And why are we taking conditional loans which are not favorable to our country? My second question, it is on economic inequalities, which remains very high in this country with significant disparity between urban and rural areas. And that is why we had the narrative of hustlers versus royal or rather versus bourgeoisie. To me, inclusive growth strategies are needed to ensure that marginalized groups benefit from economic advancement. How will you ensure that economic growth will benefit all segments of society, including marginalized community, especially the youth, the women, and persons with disability? I thank you, Honorable Chairman.
Can we take Mukami as well?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. My question is that there are many unclaimed unclaimed financial assets that have not been claimed by rightful owners. What strategies will you employ to raise public awareness of the existence of these agencies to the public? The other thing, I really wanted to support you regarding KRA. There were very good system in KRA when they were recruiting the university graduates. And the government had invested a lot of money. In fact, they used to have even an intelligence department. And even those graduates were taken for training. Later on, I don't know what happened because all those graduates were fired. So what I would like to ask you, if you happen to get this chance, are you going to instate those people? Because they are trained, they know what they are supposed to do, instead of recruiting other.
You can answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And honorable members, I'll start with the questions from Honorable Ruto. On reforming Treasury, I think I talked about it, and I am committed to reforms at the Treasury. About 2 or 3 tribes manning the Treasury. Well, as a matter of fact, there has been discussion around this, and the Kenyans. And if there are people who get positions just by virtue of being from specific communities, that should not be the case, and that should end.
But the context within the question was asked was that then it also skews sharing of revenue. But sharing of revenue is not done at the Treasury. It's done in Parliament, isn't it?
That's correct, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Yeah, so, but...
where everybody is represented.
Yeah, but I think also on the issue of inclusivity, we need to be inclusive in all government ministries. Let's not just look at Treasury as alone.
Yes.
And by the way, Mr. Speaker, there was a talk that I'm most likely going to be the first cabinet secretary from my community. So that in itself, both, Mr. Speaker. I can't remember any other Luo who has ever been in that ministry. The only closest we came to is twice, when Tom Mboya was the Minister for Economic Planning, and when Anyang' Nyong'o was also Minister for Economic Planning.
And Adua
yeah, and Adua thrice. But National Treasury, no. But then that shows there's inclusivity, in my view. But yes, all ministries, there must be inclusivity. And in budgeting, Parliament does budgeting, and we are all represented in National Assembly. So there shouldn't be that discrimination. On financial inequality, I cannot agree with Honorable Ruto more. We must find a system, and I'm going to ensure that is done, of equitable development of this country with the little resources that we have. Mr. Speaker, you've come to my constituency. Since independence, I will tell you, we have hardly. Now, in fact, the first time we saw a black surface in my constituency in terms of tarmac road was in 2017, when we had a small stretch, and then the work stopped. It's about 4 kilometers.
What would you say if you go to North Hor?
No, and I'm just giving you the example of my constituency.
Yes.
And I know it's worse even in other places.
Yes.
Where even having a Maram road that is usable is a challenge. So we must apply the resources of this country equitably. And that was the sense of devolution, but we must also make sure that the national government funds, which is still holding about 85%, is actually applied equitably. On the issue of keeping money at homes, we must strike a balance here, Honorable Ruto. Yes, I know sometimes banks, because of the regulations and the policy that has been put in place by central bank, yes, that sometimes you go to the bank and your money, you know, sometimes I'm asked when my money comes from my SACCO, for example, Mr. Speaker, to my account, then I'm asked before I transfer it even to my wife. I'm told I must explain the source. And yet they could easily see this is from Parliament, this is from... So sometimes it can be discomforting. But we must balance that with international requirements, best practice. We are not operating in isolation, Mr. Speaker. Right now, through the Financial Action Plan Task Force, which is accepted internationally, and Kenya is a member of East and South African anti-money laundering group, where we have 22 countries. And actually, in this August, Mr. Speaker, I am likely, if you approve my appointment, to chair a council meeting of ministers on this matter. We have set rules that we have agreed on, that we have signed to, so that we are accepted. Our financial system is accepted globally. If we fail to comply to some of what we have signed for, Honorable Ruto, we stand at the risk of being blacklisted from the international market, and that has attendant consequences, which we would not want to get.
Nominee, you know, the issue
yes.
on Ruto's question
is
actually not banks making it difficult for people to deposit money over $1 million. I think it has been revised to 2. It's still 1 million.
I think it's still 1 million.
The issue is that the banks have completely misunderstood the concept and the philosophy. Because what the concept was is that if it is suspicious, you don't stop anybody from banking the money. But if it's suspicious, then you make a report to the Financial Reporting Center or any other authority. So people should not be prevented from banking money simply because it's over $1 million. But the moment the bank manager finds or feels that this money may be from a suspicious source, receive the money, hold it in abeyance, then report. Because it's very risky for people to keep money in their homes.
It's true.
And that again comes to what I think Kimani Ichung'wah, somebody said, communication. Communicate to the public. If a trader in Kikomba, now they do cashless, but many traders in many places receive cash. 5 million, 10 million. But they are afraid of going to the bank because there's a list of about 20 questions. Yes. Yes, and this is a cash economy.
Yeah, and actually,
you must simplify this.
Thank you, I get you. Mr. Speaker, and actually it distorts our financial system completely. I agree. But Mr. Speaker, maybe allow me just to say two things in response to that. One is that I agree that this has been interpreted differently by banks, and we know why. I personally know why. It is because there was a period, remember the NYS scandals and those scandals, many banks were forced to pay fines. So banks became too cautious. So I think what we may need to do, or what I would do once in office, if you approve my nomination, is to have a meeting with the Kenya Bankers Association and also with the central bank, so that this matter is clarified, so that it doesn't become a bottleneck for Kenyans to bank, because the most ideal is for Kenyans to have money in their bank accounts. On the issue of pensioners, I want to also, again, which has been raised by Honorable Shuria, pensioners not being paid. Apart from the time lag between the time you retire to the time you start getting your pension, and I think we need to treat our senior citizens better. You know, you have offered a service to the public. Now that you are supposed to enjoy some of the benefits of the money that was saved, or you saved, or was saved on your behalf, you need to. Mr. Speaker, in the year ending 30th June 2024, we failed as a country to pay pension to the tune of 26 billion shillings. These are Kenyans who have retired and did not get their pension. This is a matter that I want to agree, and it is something that I'd already picked up, that we will make sure that we pay pensioners as and when immediately they retire. And this cannot be done.
If you get there,
yes,
John Mbadi, even as an MP, which you still are,
yes,
I'm sure you know that when you go to your constituent's office or your home, about 10-20% of elderly people who visit you are carrying papers of unpaid pensions for 10 years, even more.
I have many of the messages here, Mr. Speaker,
yes,
in my phone. So you are saying exactly what is correct.
Yes.
But Mr. Speaker, I am happy that we changed the system of contributing to the pension in this country, because again, the issue of sustainability comes about. The pension system that we have been running as a country was not sustainable, but with the superannuation scheme, we are likely now to keep abreast to the pension. But in the meantime, we must settle all the pensions that those pensioners who are eligible for receiving pension. And Mr. Speaker, I want to go to the questions raised by Honorable Mboko, Mishi Mboko, the MP for Likoni. There has been economic unrest, let me call it unrest, largely attributable to economic conditions, and unemployment being key. Mr. Speaker, every government has a vision. We had the vision in 1965, the sessional paper. I remember when Kibaki came in, there was economic recovery strategy for growth and employment. That was 2003. Then we came to Vision 2030 in 2008, which has been broken down into 5-year medium-term plans. We are in the last medium-term plan. All these, if you look at them, especially now Vision 2030, which is operating at the moment, or obtaining at the moment, it was anchored on 3 pillars. The economic pillar, at least 10% growth, which we have not realized. There is a social pillar on equity, or inequality, or inclusivity. And then there is also the political pillar based on democracy and accountability to the people. If we follow this vision and model our philosophy to actualize that, then we will address the problem of unemployment, which is the single most important challenge that we have as a country today. In 2019, our population census was at 47 million plus. Out of that, Mr. Speaker, 35 million was people or Kenyans below 35 years, 75%. And this is a generation we have educated through free primary education and subsidized secondary education from 2003. Very ready for the market, no employment. That is why I was saying we need to shift our attention from using agriculture, which is the main driver of our economy, as an end in itself, to providing raw material for manufacturing so that we can create more job opportunities. With that, then we will be able to address this economic unrest, if I may borrow your word, Honorable Ms. Shimboko. And again, on economic inequalities, we need to, I am already thinking that World Bank is funding, although it is a loan, but very concessional loans, the social safety nets. We need not to put too much pressure on our expenditure. To free that money for other development activities, we get the World Bank to fund some of these safety net measures to remove inequalities that we have, even as we invest more money to the rural areas. Remember, both parties, let me repeat it again, the Kenya Kwanza has this belief on value addition, but also ODM and Azimio had a belief in investing in rural economy through making sure that we have even markets in rural areas, that we open up rural areas for development. If you do that, you will minimize and reduce inequality and create more jobs. Honorable Mukami asked about unclaimed assets. I must admit that personally I have not engaged a lot with this Unclaimed Assets Authority, but if there are reforms that are needed to ensure that it lives to its mandate, statutory mandate, I will make sure that that is done, that the reforms are carried out, and capacity is built into that authority, so that Kenyans who are still there and can get what is left behind by their loved ones, get them their dues. They should trace those who should benefit from some of these unclaimed assets. But the amount... I
think what you should, if you get there, that is, improve is how to manage those unclaimed assets.
Yeah.
Take, for example, a person dies intestate, unmarried, but has relatives. You had a bank account to which you are the sole operator. You've left money there. The Unclaimed Assets Authority should get the banks to give them the details, which must be available, so that they publish for the next of kin of such fellows to come forward. But what they do is just treat it as unclaimed assets and proceed to take the money. And that is not right. There is nobody in this country who has no relatives. Not in Africa.
And Mr. Speaker, since this is a state enterprise or state corporation under my ministry, I will make sure that that is done. Actually, recently, I saw what one bank did. I will not give more details, but one bank reached out to beneficiaries of someone who died about 8 years ago, and they were still holding the money, and the beneficiaries came forth and got their money back. So that is what we should do with this authority. Finally, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, on Mukami.
Yes.
No, the other one, she actually agreed with me on the recruitment of staff.
Yeah, the other one is about the graduates who were trained.
Yes.
And they were fired.
KRA.
Yeah, in KRA.
Yeah.
And regarding the system, because now you know what is happening. You can imagine the KRA officers are going loud, correcting taxes from hairdressers, mama boga, and yet there were systems. So that is why I was asking whether you reinstate those people, because the government had taken them for training.
Yeah, I actually said that there was a system in place of training graduates, and I think it was a very good system. Honorable Mukami agreed.
Yes.
As to reinstating those who probably should have remained on the payroll, that I cannot give a promise until I understand.
Yes.
You know, there are human HR issues and the legal issues. Unless I get to understand the technical issues, I may be talking about something that may not be tenable.
Miss.
Chairman, I'm sorry, but part of my question was not answered. Chairman, I had asked in the issue of the ceiling on borrowing, and also I quoted one example of a borrowing which we did on the SGR project, where we borrowed a lot of money from Exim Bank from China. I've raised this issue because I don't want to see you repeating the same mistake which was done during the last regime, and that is why we're having a lot of challenges now financing that loan to China Exim Bank. You didn't say anything about that.
Although he had already said many things about commercial borrowing and concessional borrowing.
Maybe just to summarize it by saying that public project investment management is a challenge. And I said I will make sure that we are investing on viable projects, whether it is from local funds or borrowed funds. And I also mentioned, Mr. Speaker, if you can recall, that we will be linking loans to specific projects and making sure that the expenditure is, public procurement is followed and done prudently, efficiently, and economy for money of the shilling is realized.
Let's take the last one from Amisi.
That was it.
Yeah. Caleb?
Thank you, Mr.
One
Speaker.
question.
Yeah, for being last, give me two, kindly. Thank you, Speaker. I know also I get an opportunity to listen to the entire interview when you are last, and you seem to be a person ready to disturb the stubborn status quo at the Treasury. But, you know, the former president of U.S., I think it's Harry Truman, once said that he actually had a plate like this one at his desk and written there, the buck stops here. So you might consider having such a plate on your desk and you write there, the buck stops here. Because, Mr. Speaker, the reason why you are in this job is actually from the reject the finance bill. So we are going to be at the center of budgeting and the financing for that budget. One of the ways of raising, we've said the revenue from the loans, borrow either domestically, externally, or grants. There is the aspect of domestic borrowing from the diaspora. I've studied 3 countries, Tajikistan, Nicaragua, and the Philippines, and even India. They have one of the highest diaspora remittance. And in fact, for Philippines, almost 35% of their GDP is from diaspora remittance.
26%.
26.
Yes.
Some countries are as high as 30. I've studied them. In fact, I'll give you a report. You also study. And if you can also zero down to diaspora and make something like a diaspora bond or diaspora infrastructure bond, where the government borrows from it, and the diaspora, because you see Kenyans demonstrating in London, because they have an interest in this country, wherever they are. So they fail to remit that money and invest here, and invest elsewhere. So we can tap into the global flow of income, basically, because we don't have the oil, we don't have the natural gases. So how do we maximize? That's something that I want you to really explain to me. And the last one, Speaker, at the aftermath of the World War, 700 delegates met in Mount Washington in Britain, New Hampshire. And they developed an international system. And that's where now the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development came in. The IMF came in. The purpose was for reconstruction for the World Bank. On this other hand, the IMF, the purpose was to stabilize currencies of various countries, stabilization, and to balance of payment. But this system has saturated our domestic policies. They have saturated our physical and the monetary policies. So much so that a minister sitting at Treasury has World Bank in his head. He knows that in absence of this, I rush to World Bank. It's no longer a port of last call. It's now a port of first call. How do we dislink our development path from the continuous dependence on the brutal with institutions that were there to reconstruct Europe and Japan after the World War II?
Nominee, answer those quickly. We are running out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
Do I proceed? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Kaleba Mitsi, the MP for Saboti, has actually noticed that I'm very ready to disturb the stubborn status quo at the Treasury. You could not be more right. Mr. Speaker, I am sure that His Excellency the President did not appoint me just to continue with the business as usual at the Treasury, because then there would be no need to make changes. He would have just continued with the person who was there. So I have an assignment to do. I will discuss with His Excellency the President on how to help reform the Treasury and to do it properly, and together with the Cabinet. On domestic borrowing and diaspora, I had a lot on how we can borrow more funds, whether green bonds, blue bond, and floating diaspora bond. It's only that the time limitation, I could not mention all of them. But I want to agree with Honorable Kaleba Mitsi that that is an area that we can tap on. And even look at ways of reducing transaction costs for diaspora remittances, because that's one of the reasons that you hear them complain a lot about. On IMF, by the way, I want to be very clear on IMF. IMF will never invite themselves to a country. We do invite them and agree with them on a program. There was a period we were not under IMF, but because of challenges occasioned largely by COVID-19 and the drought in the region, and also the global disturbance of the supply chain and all that, we then went back to IMF in 2020, 2021. But I have looked at what are these conditionalities. You know, sometimes we may blame IMF for nothing. We have agreed with them on a program, Mr. Speaker, that for us to tap onto that loan, what we must do, in fact, is one key thing: revenue mobilization. So we just need to agree on how we can convince IMF for the period that we are going to be under their program, which I don't think should be long. We must move to a system where we divorce ourselves from IMF and start depending on ourselves as we were before. But that we can only do by by doing what can be done in the interest of the country. They want us to maintain a deficit of no more than 4.4%. That's what we have agreed on currently. But we are moving towards, and we must move towards, a budget deficit in the region of 2.5 to 3%. I know government has talked about 3.1. We can sustain a budget financing gap of 3%. With that, you will not need IMF intervention. And Mr. Speaker, I said, I want to end with that if we take back, don't even go to the ambitious 25% that we have set to ourselves of tax revenue to GDP. If we can take it back to 18%, we will be adding to our exchequer not less than 600 billion. And I think it is achievable. I believe it will be done.
Thank you, Nominee. A quick run in a few issues thrown at us by the public. Some you have already spoken to. Are you aware that interest rates on loans are all-time high? What will you do to save Kenyans from exploitation by banks? Does Mbadi believe in single portal for tax revenue collection? How do you plan to position internal audit department to deal with zero-fault audit? Confirm or deny allegations of corruption at the University of Nairobi? I don't know whether when you are there or now, they're not saying. What are you going to do on unpaid refund from KRA for insurance agents? How will you expand tax base on how will you reduce tax evasion and increase compliance? Prioritize payment to UHC and JSS staff. Will you do that when you get in? How will you deal with late capitation to schools? Whether you will make public contracts like SGR with public with Kenyans, because Kenyans have been asking for that, just as you have said that you will make public debt public. Housing levy, will you tell Kenyans where this fund is domiciled? Is it in consolidated fund or is it in treasury bonds? Those are from the public. There is also, how will you promote the informal sector in Kenya? For instance, would you propose that all government offices procure locally manufactured furniture? Do you think that certain parts of the 2010 Constitution have contributed to a high public wage bill compared to GDP due to an excessively large administration? For instance, there are over 450 MPs, 1,500 MCAs, 47 county governments. If this is the case, what are your thoughts? Would you recommend that the president proposes a referendum to reduce the constitutional overload of the administration? Those are members of the public listening into this conversation. If you can deal quickly with those, I have only one question for you.
Chairman, there is another one regarding money laundering. What are you going to do about it?
So if you can run through all those. Some you have already talked about. You can.
Yeah. Actually, even the question by Honorable Mukame, I think I talked about that.
You did.
We are even hosting a regional body. Kenya is trying to comply.
Yes.
By the way, I would have to. Mr. Speaker, I'll just pick on a few. Interest rate, I think we talked about.
Of the public watching these proceedings, and I think that's very good.
Interest rate is high. It's now at 13.3%. It has moved up. But part of the reason why monetary policy, CBK came up with this monetary policy was to reduce inflation. You know, it was at a point when inflation was very high. Our inflation had reached 9.6%, in 2022 October. So it had to come. We had to cool the economy.
Yes, Junet?
The Speaker, nominee, interest rate is not at 13%. 13% is the CBK monetary policy rate. But the interest rates now, banks are charging us 20%, 21%.
20 plus.
20 plus, not 13, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Nyet, for helping. By the way, you know when accountants...
You know Junet is a trader, so he knows.
Yeah. When accountants talk about interest rate, we only talk about the the CBK rates, the interbank lending rates and all that. So the rates, the base lending rates, is at 13.3%. Let me make it clear. And that gives rise to even 20% charged by banks based on risk assessment. So this was done to cool the economy, but I think when I made my initial contributions, I said it has reached a point where we have to now balance between controlling inflation and making money available to the private sector. Mr. Speaker, remember there was a time banks were chasing all over the place to take money using pay slips. It's not there anymore. Why? Because government has become the single most important customer to banks. So it is between chicken and egg. Which one comes first? Do we cut on our expenditure? Do we reduce money that we borrow domestically first? Or do we reduce the rates first? So those are the issues that we need to balance. So I'll have a meeting with the Central Bank and Kenya Bankers Association to address this matter. If I am confirmed. Mr. Speaker, on internal audits, I can't agree more. Again, we must use our internal audit to improve efficiency in financial management. And internal audit is resident at the Treasury. This issue of corruption at the UN, I saw it on some email that was sent to me. And the allegation was that I used...
The same person.
I suspect that while working at the University of Nairobi, that I used the university to campaign. Probably the person who has sent that message is not alive to the fact that I left university and went elsewhere, worked for 3.5 years before I became a member of parliament.
You said so.
Yeah, so I left university in 2004. And actually I resigned and got my pension back. It was 218,000. If I stole their money, they would have not paid me my pension. I think that's, to me, someone who probably is wondering how I made it to parliament, and I didn't have, like I didn't have money.
Just go on.
Yeah, but I want to tell him that I was or her, that I was the least endowed in 2007. Actually, they used to make a joke that I was campaigning with a bicycle and made it to parliament because of trust that the people had in me. Late capitation to schools, this is all about availability of revenue. We must make money available and pay capitation, pay pension, pay CDF. Remember, we have rolled over 13 billion from last year's NGCDF. I personally, Mr. Speaker, am a proponent of National Government Constituency Development Fund. I support it fully because this is money that has revolutionized education in rural areas. You go to my constituency, the constituency I've represented for 15 years. Before CDF, we didn't even have primary schools. They were there by name, but there were no classrooms. Right now you can see what it has done, and many others. Contracting, making public the contracts, that I started by saying we must be transparent and communicate what we do as a country. Housing levy, I don't want to really talk a lot about this housing levy because I still need to understand how it is operationalized, where the money is resident, and all the challenges around it we must deal with, because it is my duty, if I'm confirmed, it is my duty to make sure that this money is properly accounted for. Promoting informal sector, I think I talked about that.
Yes,
in terms of wage bill contributed by the Constitution. That is true. Mr. Speaker, this Constitution is too expensive. I know the counties had been given, but Mr. Speaker, truth be told, we should have had these counties as agents of devolution for development, but not government. We should have had bigger governments. Where you have now, you go to Vihiga, Mr. Speaker, it's a county. With governor, deputy governor, you have CCs, 10 of them, you have county assembly, you go to Busia.
Chief officer.
Is the same, chief officer, all that. You go to
sub-account administrators.
Yeah. And you
ward
see,
administrators, village administrators.
you name it.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, there is even a clamor, very outrageous, for more counties. My Suba community want a county. I'm even asking, is it viable?
Mary wants a county.
Mary is calling for the Teso county. Let us face it. If we could have a system where we have regional governments, and then now devolve resources. Resources you can devolve as much as you want. Look, we have devolved CDF with a fund there with a very few skeleton stuff, and it is working. We could do the same with the devolving resources. That is what Kenyans wanted. But these big governments with big cars, with flags all over the place, I think we overstretched ourselves. But that is upon Kenyans to decide. It is not John Mbadi, either as a cabinet secretary or even a member of parliament, to decide for Kenyans. Kenyans will make that decision.
Thank you, John. I'll ask you two questions. One, we were told by one of your colleague nominees that in the road sector alone, we have pending bills of 166 billion.
Yes.
Out of which 92 is actual debt or bills, and the rest is interest and penalties.
Yeah.
Now, in the event you get this position you are looking for, would you take time to negotiate with the people you owed the money to compromise on interest and penalties so that you reduce the weight on the exchequer? Number two, the PFM Act is very clear, and we passed it in this parliament, that no procuring agent can procure goods and services unless there's an attendant budget and funds. How are you going to ensure that this is enforced so that we don't run into these problems of pending bills? Because if you have an attendant budget, you procure goods and services, on delivery or completion, you pay. What are you going to do?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree that we will have to negotiate the interests and penalties that have been charged on various contracts. I am aware of that bill by the ministry. That is actually State Department for Roads. If you go to our records in Parliament, Public Accounts Committee had requested the Ministry of Roads to provide information on pending bills, analyzed, categorized in terms of principal sum, interest, and penalties. And we have that information in Parliament. I'm sure my colleagues will submit a report to the effect. We actually were recommending that the government negotiates with these contractors on the interest and penalties. But that you can only do if you show willingness and you show intention to pay. So I will work with the Cabinet Secretary for Roads and Infrastructure to make sure that we clearly demonstrate an intention to settle these bills. Road construction has stalled across the country as a result of this. And I will tell you, my constituency, where I come from, is one of them. as a one project which has just stalled because of this. So we need to do this across the country so that the road construction resumes. Because we have already invested money in these roads. We can't continue keeping them. But we have constraints. Look at the budget of roads, Minister. In fact, I was saying that that budget, at the rate of 50 billion, the pending bills alone, you may require not less than 3-4 years. But then if you have to finance all committed...
Fact, Churchill told us committed road projects.
That's actually where I was heading.
Are 1 trillion.
Yes. If you have to commit to for all commitments, you need 20 years. Committed roads, that is roads that have been started, their value, if you sum all of them across the country. So it's terrible. There are some initiatives which I think we should promote, where we get some of this road infrastructure done through PPPs. But there is also an initiative to negotiate, if the terms would be favorable, with some of the contractors that are coming from specific countries to take up this, if it is within our budget ceiling, loan ceiling or debt ceiling, to take them up. Like the Chinese government has so many contractors around here who are doing roads using GOK funds. Currently, there are very few road projects done by loans from China. They are all working on roads funded by GOK funds. So we need to explore that. Finally, on procurement without budget, Mr. Speaker, this is again another problem. And the problem is not entirely that there is no budget. The budget is not there, but there is no money. Mm-hmm. The exchequer releases come late. Why? Because we are not able to collect. Mm-hmm. We don't have money. So we must just cut our clothes according to our sizes. Mm-hmm. That is the starting point. The planning we must have, and someone asked about the planning in one single portal. There is a disconnect between planning and budgeting. We need to synchronize. And this is the same ministry. Mm-hmm. We must ensure that we link planning to budgeting, to cash management, so that we don't commit ourselves into purchasing or contracting when we don't have the capacity to pay.
We have grossly overshot the time. There are some people watching from US who have sent these 2 questions. What is your view on the potential of blockchain technology within the financial sector, particularly in light of the blockchain technology report to 2020? Would you support the adoption of this technology? The next one, in light of the increasing global uncertainties and economic volatility, gold reserves have become more crucial in safeguarding national wealth and ensuring economic stability. Elaborate on how you would propose leveraging gold reserves as a reliable store of value in the current and future economic landscape. Additionally, would you explain any strategic measures that can be considered to enhance the role of gold in Kenya's financial system? Take at maximum 2 minutes. These are Kenyans watching these proceedings from the US. Pardon?
The first one of the blockchain, Mr. Speaker, I must admit that I need to understand it better. And
that is an honest answer. We understand.
We need to get what it is. If it is something that
don't
can
also
help
know it.
The country,
I also don't know it.
The better. On leveraging on gold reserves.
We'll need somebody to teach us about it.
Do we have an ICT person around? But don't you worry, Mr. Speaker. Now that's broad.
There's a nexus between finance and ICT.
We will.
CBK, maybe when you get, if you get approved, CBK should be able to sort you.
Yes. Okay.
That's why I was saying that don't you worry, I will get...
On the gold reserves, just say yes or no.
Yeah, gold reserves, that actually we need as a country to move towards even establishing sovereign wealth funds, and gold reserves can help us in that. Yes. And those are areas, those are emerging areas that we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, John Mbadi, as a nominee, I have some few mundane questions for you. Have you ever been adversely mentioned in any integrity-related report or investigations?
No.
Do you hold any leadership position in any political party within Kenya?
No, at the moment.
You said you resigned.
Yes.
Can you tell us your net worth?
My net worth, Mr. Speaker, is 380 million. And, Mr. Speaker, my net worth, the difference between, I saw some of my colleagues have done their calculation differently, but my understanding of net worth is it's assets less liabilities.
Liability, yes.
So if you take all the assets that I have, and I wish I had my file here.
I've seen your calculation.
Yeah, it's 308.
You have 437.
Yeah, 437
less 57
assets.
million liabilities.
Yes.
You are 380.
Yeah, and the liabilities is mortgage within Parliamentary Service Commission.
SACCO loans.
SACCO loans, about 20 million, about. And finally, there is the KCB Bank loan of about 12 million. Yeah.
We received 43. We received 34.
The only deferred income, Honorable, the only deferred income I have is I have some I have two now, but the one for Parliament, I don't know. The pension, I don't know how much it will be, so I didn't.
It will be calculated.
But there's one which I have with ICA of about 6 million.
Your pensionable now it will be calculated.
Yeah.
It will be just below 200.
Thank you.
Chair, I was mentioning that because of the challenges Kenyans have had with this matter, because like now his deferred income next year would constitute part of his net worth, or rather when it matures.
Yes.
And most likely, if he's approved or if he goes through another vetting, Kenyans will want to know
how did your wealth grow?
How did your wealth grow?
I will be able to explain that, Mr. Speaker.
So, nominee John Mbadi, we received 34 memoranda against or about you, some saying it was right to be nominated, others not. And there are three particularly that just involve around, I think, parochial conflicts within your political setup. But you have answered all of them. So we will be, there's some things that clearly look parochial, how you quarreled with people in political meetings and so on. So we've also looked at your documents and cross-checked with what we have, and we found them correct. So unless you are lawfully held, you are released to go to your other duties.
Thank you.
Today is your Sabbato.
Yes.
So you can go to church.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I requested for my date to be changed, but the only time which was available was still Sabbato.
Yes.
Because it was 7 p.m. yesterday.
Yes.
And according to my faith, from 6 p.m. or thereabout, already Sabato imeingia. So, but I treated this as kama, is it donkey ama ng'ombe imeanguka kwa shimo?
Yes. Lazima utoe.
Yeah, but thank you, Mr. Chairman, together with the members of Parliament, members of the committee, for giving me this opportunity to appear before you and present my case. I have done my best. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant, you can escort the nominee. Thank you. Pardon, we'll give you 5 minutes. And let me also say this. Of course, this was a candidate of immense interest, given the importance of the docket. There will be others with less immense interest. So we'll recover the time we have overshot with the next or the other. Yes.